Please, a round of applause for Dr. Salami. Right. Chairman, sir, as you are the only one on the you are chairing, you are session chair. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you. I have a deck of slides, but I'm going to crave your indulgence. Since I have only 20 minutes, I will essentially give you a summary of what it is, but you will get the deck of slides, and feel free to reach out to me should you need to. So what I've been asked to speak to about the new rules of growth, and I think there are, is there a, especially for you guys, is the introduction of artificial intelligence. Because you guys now, your biggest challenge is, first, how do we preserve creativity? Human creativity, human contribution. Second, how do we know what is true? Third, what's the ethics of the new environment? Now, as it is, I'm not sure what work Advan or any of the industry associations is doing in this respect. Beyond that, well, simultaneous faster risk transmission, inequality, but the biggest one for me is it's the exposure of state capability. To what extent can nations, can governments across the world deal with what we are now increasingly facing? And this, for me, especially in an emerging market like ours, becomes a very, very real headache that you'd have to deal with. So this is one of the, very big issues for me when you talk about the new rules of, how do we grow? At the heart of these new rules is going to be technology, whether we like it or not, whether I'm talking about AI or not. Today, you look around the world, you see what Elon Musk and his group are doing. You look around the world, you see the big fights or the big competitive impulses between China and the United States as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. You know what is ironic? We are nowhere inside this conversation. Well, I was asking the other day, I was asking a friend of mine, I said, you're doing AI. AI involves training all of these, your software, to understand how people behave. Sorry, are we inside, is the way we behave inside the training that you people are doing? Unfortunately, he just smiled and left me, which essentially answered my question. But essentially, what they're saying is, we are going to have to domesticate by ourselves. And so the question is, to what extent are we even ready to play that game? Okay? So, let me also now quickly move to some stuff. Globally, I've already spoken about artificial intelligence. Geopolitics is going to continue to be a major issue. And by the way, one of the things that actually astonishes me these days is the extent to which the Gulf is responsible for some of Africa's problems. Why do I say that? Some of the money funding terrorism actually comes from some of the Gulf states. And so to that extent, and guess what? When we say we are looking for money for infrastructure, this, that, and the other, we are headed to the Gulf. So there is a conflation of who's who. In my village, they used to say, may we not eat the food of our enemies. Or I say our enemies are the one responsible for. But I hope you understand the nature of the evolving challenge that some of us can see. Now, let me quickly go to, I'll leave this now. So a couple of things that I think you guys need to understand. The world's changing. Artificial intelligence, but at the heart of it is a multipolar world. What do I mean by multipolar world? Up until now, we really used to play around three poles for growth. The United States, China, and to a certain extent, Europe. Liberation Day in 2025 essentially formalized a schism in global trade. and everybody is now beginning to look out for themselves. Now you have the BRICS, you have the Canadians essentially looking to join. So new alliances are being built. And the key question is, how does that affect the kind of work that you guys do? Beyond that, one of the other key things that I would like us to pay attention to is what's happening in Nigeria. Nigeria is in a very funny position at the moment. And let me quickly explain that. Yes, reform is ongoing. Second, the impact of reform only comes after the cost of reforms have manifested. And it's important for everybody to understand that. The impact of reform only comes after the cost of reform has manifested. So we're seeing some impact, but we're seeing a lot of costs that we have refused to bear for 40, 50 years that we are now having to bear. That's not my real challenge. Let me tell you what my real challenge is that the nature of the conversations that we are having does not actually fully define our reality. And let me define those realities for you so you understand. To begin with, I can see people who are old enough to remember what I'm about to say. Once upon a time, General Yakubu Gowon, as head of state, was reported to say that Nigeria's problem is not money, but how to spend it. Okay, we are now in a point where our problem is not how to spend it, but it is money. Why do I immediately draw your attention to that? Everybody has been jumping up and down. Oh, they removed subsidy. Oil price has gone up. Where has our money gone? Is that not the chorus? Okay, so let me explain where your money has gone. In Naira terms, your money is still there. In other words, it's rising. In dollar terms, your money is nowhere. Understand the following. In 2011, federal government's revenue was probably around 10 trillion or slightly less than that. But it was able to buy $72 billion worth of goods and services. In 2025, government's revenue was probably around 26, 25, somewhere between 25 but under 30 trillion. It was only able to buy $16.5 billion worth of goods and services. So when all of you are shouting, where has our money gone? Your money hasn't gone very far. It's essentially where your money has gone. In other words, the value of the money has diminished significantly. The second piece that I would like to draw your attention to, I'm coming to the piece that you're interested in, but the second piece that I would like to draw your attention to is that you need to understand that as you look at the economy in Nigeria today, there's what we call deindustrialization going on. In the 1980s, if I broke the economy into three, primary, secondary, tertiary sectors. Primary are agric and mining. Secondary are all the things that allow you to do manufacturing, transform goods that you inherited into something else, and then services. Today, services are 52%. In 1980, industry was about 60%. Today, industry is 16%. Let me let that sink in. Industry today is 16%. And yet, industry is where job creation is supposed to be most, available. The second piece that you guys need to also understand about the nature of the market that is evolving is that today, if you look at Nigeria's labor force, 93% of it is in the informal sector. Only 7% is in the formal sector waged. I hope you understand what that means. Why? Because the informal sector is fragile. The kind of jobs that people do. What's informality? Informality is you have not registered with government. Basically, that's the simplest definition. And so, if you're looking at an informal sector organization, these are, there are organizations that have no complete registration. Let me just put it like that. And if that is where 48% of our total output is coming from, then you can now understand the problem in the following terms. Take these numbers down. Labor force, formal sector 7%. Output, formal sector 52%. So 7% of the labor force is responsible for 52% of output. Informal sector, 48%. Labor force, 97%. That you don't need to be a genius to immediately figure it out, that the level of income in the informal sector is, and guess what? You are advertisers. The people who are paying you to advertise are asking you to advertise to the 100%. And yet, you can already see where the problems are going to come from. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Now, these are some of the issues that, you need to pay attention to. There is quite a few more. There was something which I said to an audience yesterday, which seems to have found its way, into social media, about how income is concentrating upwards, because that was the point I was trying to make. That 25 years ago, the top 1% of Nigeria held about 25% of wealth. Now, they hold roughly 44% of wealth. In other words, what we're seeing, so I've now told you quite a number of things. I've told you, most people, income fragile. I've now told you, income and wealth are concentrating upwards. And so, when you people are talking to your clients about how to reach your target market, the question is, who's now your target market? I hope you understand. Because your target market certainly can be premium only. And the key question is, how do you figure out the other pieces of the market, and how do you kind of reach out to them? So that's, something that you kind of need to understand. What else should I tell you about the economy before I move on? In terms of just looking at our economy, there is a major issue that is already upon us, but I'm not sure we are paying enough attention to it. What's that issue? I said earlier, government says, my problem is not money, it's how to spend it. Now, we're at that place where how to spend is not your problem, but money is. But let me further exemplify that just for you. Think about this. Infrastructure spend that Nigeria needs to make over the next 20 years is probably about 2.5 trillion. Okay? This is not guesstimate. This is our own internal Nigeria report. Which means you're needing to spend about $100 billion every year. All the 36 states and federal government, all their spending is probably about $60 billion every year. So the question is this, 100 billion spent, Abi, they need to bring 56% of it. So if they're going to put $56 billion on infrastructure, and their total spend, including debt service, is about 60 billion. Now you can see where there is a real problem. And the reason I'm drawing your attention to this is that too many people are still making the wrong noises. We want government to build school. We want government to build road. We want government to do this. We don't want to pay taxes. We don't want them to borrow. The economics just doesn't add up. The economics just doesn't add up. And you guys are the kind of guys who need to be able to help the government communicate where the reality of our situation is. By the way, the politicians are all still saying the government must do this, must do that, must do the other. They are not understanding that, sorry, the monies that you are holding do not buy you what it is that you want. The days when you went into the market, and could point, okay, this one, down the pass. Now you look at, people complain, we're only buying China. Well, that's what the money can afford. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. Now, I'm going to make a case study of FMCG in a minute, because I was asked to speak about the consumer landscape, and I will come to that. But let me quickly show you something. You will get all of this, so don't worry. Yeah. Pay attention here. This is, remember I said, households, firms, government, and markets are what make up any economy. Just look at this. Look at the blue line. That is household consumption. What this is telling you, ladies and gentlemen, is that your consumers are under distinct and intense pressure. And by the way, it didn't start recent, and add that to 18. That's over 80% of total spending. Am I not correct? What that means is that in 2003, what we had as an economy was essentially a subsistence economy, where you are trying to keep body and soul together. Okay, now look at where we are in 2024. If you add all of those together, 40 plus 5 plus 8, that's about 53%. What that is telling you is that there has been a significant shift in how we spend money. Now, there are some interesting questions that may be exercising your mind. All me I'm telling you is those are the numbers. But also bear in mind what is changed. Look at a couple of things. Healthcare from 1.4 to 6.10. I hope you can see that. Transport has also pretty much doubled. Healthcare, 5-fold increase. Just short of 5-fold, because 5-fold will be 7. Just short of 5-fold. Healthcare, transport, pretty much just doubled. Information and communication, your mobile phone, has gone from 0.10 to 3.3. That's almost a 30-fold increase in terms of share of wallet. Okay? Now, what else do I need to point to your, draw to your attention? We will reach there now. Let's calm down. Look at education services from 0.2 to 6.2, approximately a 12-fold increase. In other words, people are spending more money out of their own pockets in order to afford this. Health and education, I understand. Education is the intergenerational gate fee to success. So a generation feels it's struggling, it feels if it pays for education, the next generation has a better chance. In terms of healthcare, much as we would all like to sit on the right-hand side of whoever we believe, we are not in a hurry to die. And so to that extent, we are happy to spend more money in that direction. Now, let's now come to restaurants and accommodation services. All this means is very simple. Rent is already captured in number 4. So these are short-term uses. Your children go to hostels, Airbnb, any food that you eat outside the house is now. And see what has happened from 1% to almost 13%. And so the point to make, ladies and gentlemen, is honestly very simple. And by the way, personal care, social protection, in other words, what you give family, again, that's risen from 0.3 to 3.3, certainly a 10-fold increase. So the point that all of this makes as a whole is just one, that the economy in Nigeria, for all the pressures, if you look at it on a short-term basis, you will be depressed. But if you look at it over a period of time, this economy seems to be moving from a subsistence economy in the direction of a lifestyle economy. Let me tell you what's incomplete about this data. This is everybody. If only we could break this up to say the top of the pyramid, the middle of the pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid, to see how their spending pattern changes or is close enough to all of this, then you know who you are targeting in different domains. But I think this is kind of really important. Now let me, as I said, I played one funky game. All of this I've spoken about. I thought to look at FMCGs as a case study of how the environment is changing and what implications it is having. And the first thing is that, look, pricing versus volume is now a real argument. Okay, pricing versus volume. Why? Inflation is keeping people hamstrung, and therefore they are needing to think carefully about what do we do. Because no matter how you look at it, inflation 17.25, I'm sorry, 0.52, and by the way, food inflation in particular. So there is a fundamental challenge that needs to be driven there. And because of that, consumer spending is constrained. That's that blue line that you saw, that was beginning to fall. And also not beginning to fall. Now, so the challenge that FMCGs are facing is how consumers are responding. How consumers are responding, and how are they responding? All of us know this: down trading from premium to value, and so your own clients have to ensure that their what do you call those things? Their portfolio has both premium and value, so that people don't fall out of their portfolios, or else there's going to be trouble for them. And then, of course, pack size changes. This started in '89. Remember Promacidor, Cowbell, and the sachetization of milk, exactly. And by the way, every time I think about this, in 1989, you had to be poor to use powdered milk. No, now you had to be poor, because the milk to drink in public is peak milk, or was peak milk. There was Dano. Today, Chairman, peak milk sales is trying to understand where the market has gone. And by the way, peak now has powder. And so that is the evolution in the marketplace that we're seeing. And then, of course, the challenge that your clients, or the clients of your clients, one of your friend, the friend of your friend, or the enemy of your enemy is your friend, the client of your client, is that lower frequency of purchases. And so they are needing to think very carefully about what to do. Now, again, one of the key challenges that your own clients have to think about is what are the key channels. And what is pretty clear is that, look, general trade still remains the largest volume player, and our sense of it is that it's still about 75% in terms of this is where Wahala starts, because today the marketplace is now no longer where we used to find it. It used to be a physical marketplace. Today we have now moved to a digital marketplace. Instagram in particular has become a marketplace. I doubt if anybody had told me 15-20 years ago that it would be like this, that I actually would have believed it. But that is now where the real development game is going to be at. And your own question to yourself is, what's our play in this new environment? Sorry, madam, my apologies. Well, okay, I think I've spoken too much of this. Yeah, okay. Please, innovation and the speed of innovation becomes the heart of everything now. It's no longer about taking time. It's about identifying needs and fulfilling those needs almost in record time. So, for us, just thinking about it, pricing versus volume, what's your channel strategy, and what's your competitive intensity? These are the issues that your own clients have to deal with, and you have to be part of their understanding and appreciation of what they need to do. And so, our question then becomes, okay, what should you guys be telling your people? Well, affordability engineering. Affordability engineering is going to be at the heart of responding to things. Actually, there are two pieces. First of all, yes, certainly there is affordability engineering, pulling up your volumes without destroying your margins. Okay, it's not going to be easy, but as I said, that there are at least two key domains, in here. Yes, affordability engineering, but the other thing you have to be telling them is exactly what does their portfolio look like. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. What is the total composition of their portfolio, and how effective is their portfolio strategy as opposed to a particular product strategy? Forgive me, I'm not a market strategist, I'm just an economist. But at the heart of it for me, in terms of my own appreciation, is that, look, portfolio strategy is now increasingly going to be if not as important, if not more important, certainly as important as looking at market and product strategies. That at the heart of it is, because remember what I said earlier, concentrating upwards income. So if I don't have anything to serve the premium, I'm not going to take their money. At the base, the question is, at what point do they become price sensitive? But there is a game that very few people, in my view, are thinking about. Is it possible for me to put my hands in the pocket of the rich and use it to serve the poor? Oh, but it is. Oh, yes, it is. I'll give you 2 examples. Cast your mind back, beginning of GSM. Glo had 4-in-1. I'm sure you remember that product. 4-in-1. 4 SIM cards. Anybody who buys that has taken the cost of acquisition. But it's not going to carry 4 phones now. Driver is going to get 1, madam is going to get 1, child is going to get 1. So, and by the way, he also knows, if you don't pay part of the usage fees, the day you call your driver and they say he's no longer on this network, that's your problem. So I hope you understand what that speaks to. The second piece that it might speak to, and I'm still trying to think about this, is to what extent does the use of insurance paid for by others. So take, for example, medical insurance. Now, this begins to offer a new vista, especially in 2 domains, education and healthcare. And yet these are the areas that we are already seeing that are building share of pocket, in terms of everybody else. What else? Sorry, I'll soon be out of your hair. Yeah, you see all of that. I've spoken about portfolio. So now the other thing that I want to speak to you about is what happens between now and the end of next year. My view is honestly very simple. Nigeria is on a particular trajectory. Growth happening, inflation moderating. Please always understand this. When we say inflation is moderating, what we mean is that the rate at which it is increasing is slowing. We do not mean that prices are falling. So when they say inflation has dropped from 31% or 30% to 15%, all they are telling you is that before it used to rise, prices rose at a rate of 30%. Now they are rising at a rate of 15%. So it's not to think that, share of pocket or pocket, what do you call that thing? Purchasing power is getting any better. It's just the rate at which it is eroding that is actually just slowing down. That's all that this means. Now, for me, there are 2 problems that I can see. If the global environment doesn't do us bad, then half of our problems are solved. What do I mean by that? Remember 2025, Donald Trump wakes up, says Liberation Day, raises tariffs and problems. Then in 2026, February, Donald Trump again. Is that when we say you again? Now, when we still were going to school, they say go to the principal's office. You reach there, the principal opens up, you again. So Donald Trump again decides, under encouragement by whoever, to go after the Iranians. Now that is still ongoing. Now guess where that's now a problem for us. It boosts our revenues from the export of oil. But now fuel prices are now rising. Fuel prices are now rising. But where you and your clients are going to feel it the most is in terms of inbound and outbound logistics. Because the cost, one of the things which you will find in this deck, but which I didn't highlight, is that there is a nice gap between the farm gate price and the final price in the market. That's your route to market costs. And so as crude oil prices rise, route to market costs are going to rise. And guess what? Guess where you are? Where do you think you are? Sorry? You are part of the route to market. The guy, they've made their product, they want to sell it. You are part of the route to market. And so, as they are trying to make their route to market costs efficient, what does that mean for you? You're part of the rationalization that's going to have to happen. And so, you guys need to be thinking about it 1, 2, 3 steps ahead, or else it becomes a real problem. So, if nothing happens globally, then I think half of our problems are solved. The other piece that could be a major problem is elections. As you know, in roughly 6 months, we have a general election. By Valentine's Day next year, elections are done and we have all moved on. Now, my view is that there is no government that's facing an election that is going to do anything that will shake confidence unless it is forced to. And that forced to is where the external now comes back to play. That if for any reason, for example, crude oil prices globally were to drop significantly, then it changes all the bets. Right now, our crude oil average price for the first half of this year is about $95. Our budget assumption was $75. So we're doing quite nicely, thank you very much. But imagine anything happens and brings crude oil prices below our budget assumptions. It changes the entire constellation of how we think about it. So for me, given that we've got elections, the economy should remain stable. However, beyond Valentine's Day next year, the government it doesn't matter who wins, has to start thinking. We have to move from economic stability to economic growth. And to grow, I've given you some things that mean there's a conversation we must all have. I've told you the government doesn't have the required resources. What does that mean? You're going to have to bring private capital to the table. And all this noise that we like to make about Dangote has raised the price of fuel. It's not any longer, in my view. It's going to be a very difficult argument. Because what did Dangote do? Put $20 billion on the table to put a refinery in place. We have 4 of our own don't work. You want roads, somebody's going to have to build them. You want schools, somebody's going to have to build them. But the most important one that you want is power. Somebody's going to have to build it. And so the point I'm making is that private capital has got to come to the table. But not only must it come to the table, what the government then must be able to do is put in a regulatory environment that strikes the right balance between protecting the consumer from market power of the of the private entities and enabling the private entities to make the kind of return that I'm going to close on an example. Somebody was complaining to me that they were looking for accommodation and they were telling me rent. He said, if you see one small 2-bedroom flat and they are calling 25 million. I said, so what's wrong? He said, no, the rent is too high, I said, okay. The point I'm trying to make here goes to the returns. Anybody who plays real estate here knows that the rental yield is between 5 and 7%. If you are really lucky, you get 10%. Look in you are the guys who run the advertising now. Look in all the advertising material you're putting out. 2-bedroom flat in Lekki Phase 1 is 250 million. Not be so. If I pay 250 million to buy, and I can only charge you 12, 13 million, I've already got a problem. Why? Because if I want to buy that 250 million house, it's either I have my cash, or if I go to the bank, I will have to pay between 25 and 30%. In the meantime, the rental yield is 7. And then people are saying, people are not building house for rent. How? I hope you understand the point I'm making. In other words, if money is now our problem, And to solve that problem, we are going to bring private capital to the table. Vietnam, I think I was reading this last week. I don't know whether it was last week. I was reading last week. Vietnam is shopping for $1 trillion to build infrastructure. Vietnam is shopping for $1 trillion of international capital to build infrastructure. And so if we don't understand as a country that we are going to enable an alignment of returns against the risk, then we are not going to get the capital we need, and in which case we are all going to have to just calm down and wait for it to reach our turn whenever it reaches our turn. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.